You might think you know nothing about Taiyou no Yuusha Fighbird, but virtually everybody who watches this video will know one thing about it. The show features an android learning about life who happens to turn into a giant robot that uses a flaming avian motif. But it's still Fighbird, not Firebird. The show is the second in the Yuusha series, which was based on a toy line that was created to replace Transformers. Apparently, many of the toys use the same molds, so you might be able to spot something else that you recognize here. This is actually a re-release of an earlier Fighbird game, and by earlier I mean 2 weeks ago. The Game Boy game was actually the first out the gate, but the Game Boy and Famicom games are extremely similar. And if that phrase set off alarm bells for you, well, you're right. The Famicom game is a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up, and it is one of the most boring, dead easy shoot-'em-ups I've ever played. When you start the game, you get your choice of characters, and the default option is the easy mode, though switching to the more difficult character doesn't really change a whole lot. There are 3 different kinds of stages here, and you cycle through these across 4 episodes. In the first mode, you get your choice of 5 different vehicles to pilot. 3 are ground-based and 2 are flying, and the flying ones can pass over terrain, which makes them the really obvious choice to use. Really, there's no good reason to use the ground-based vehicles. You can switch between the vehicles at any time by pressing the A button. The B button fires your gun, and select is sometimes used for special mission objectives, like here where you have to place these radar dishes on platforms. If you're playing on easy mode, one enemy at a time will come out very occasionally, slowly move down the screen, and get effortlessly knocked aside by you. If you're playing on hard mode, you might see 2 enemies at the same time. Might. Either way, you're just as pokey, enemy patterns are just as simplistic, and the shooting is just as dull. In the cutscene before the stages, you're given a goal for each of these levels. So on the first stage you have to blow up all of these bees, and on the second stage you have to collect all of these escape pods. If you fail to fulfill that objective, then the whole stage loops, which if the game was difficult might work to your advantage because that includes the power-ups and extra lives. But since you don't need them, it just drags out the time. For the 5 vehicles, you have to power them up individually as well. Collecting the P power-ups will increase their firepower 1 level, and the maximum is 3. Other power-ups that will drift down from the top of the screen are hearts that will refill your life bar by 1, S's that increase your movement speed, clocks which extend your time limit and are absolutely necessary, 1-ups which are exactly what you'd expect, and miracles which have a random effect. They could freeze time, blow up all enemies on the screen, or cause the stage to accelerate. The 5 vehicles you can drive all have different weapons. The Ace Baron just shoots small beams out in front of you. The Drill Baron fires drills. These get larger as they're powered up. The Road Baron fires an explosive. The Aqua Baron, which flies, also drops explosives. And the Sky Baron fires a beam spread. Realistically though, there's not that much difference between them. All of your shots go through terrain and targets, so it's basically, do you want the short-range explosion, or do you want the long-range shot? If you complete the mission objective in this style of level, then you advance to the large flying ship. On the flying ship stages, your goal is solely to last long enough that you'll get a signal to transform. And when you have that, you hit select, and that ends the stage. On the flying ship stages, pressing A will bring up your weapon selection. You gain additional weapons by picking up the flying numbers that appear. Your primary weapon is a beam that shoots ahead, and you can charge it up for a big attack. The second and third weapons are effectively identical, a pair of shots that go out in front of you. And the final weapon is homing missiles. Survive the big ship stage and you become the giant robot. And here you're on land again, so you'll have to go around terrain. The weapon power-ups from the big ship stage carry over, but now your primary weapon becomes the sword. But you can still charge it up for a big attack. Make it to the end of the robot stage and you'll fight a boss. And these bosses go down fast. 2 fully charged shots and 1 regular shot will kill the first 2 bosses. And that's regardless of what difficulty you're playing on. The 3rd and 4th bosses take a ton of hits, but it's a lot more in line with what you'd expect. Fighbird is just trivially easy, even against the bosses. The patterns are all really basic, and once you have a feel for it, you'll have no trouble. The Famicom Taiyou no Yuusha Fighbird is not a well-regarded game. It doesn't have a very high profile in Japan, but the few people who do get it note that it's both a poor shooter and trivially easy. Fighbird is a surprisingly poor game from Irem, who's been doing a lot of quality work in the past few years on the Famicom. Don't worry too much about them, though. Their next game's a big improvement. But stay away from Fighbird. The best thing in the game is you get a little logo in the corner when you pause it. And that's not exactly a ringing endorsement.